that is, generation companies, are owed more than 5 trillion naira, which is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the power sector debts. I mean, there are the generation companies, then there is the transmission line that's run by the government, and then there are distribution companies. But the Gencos are owed about 5.2 trillion naira, and they say that the debts keep mounting, mounting at the rate of 250 million naira every month, which means the Nigerian government keeps owing them. Right now, the federal government has decided to settle these debts, but not directly. So the government is planning to issue a bond to be able to pay this debt. If you want to understand everything about it, there's a story on nigeriainfo.fm that explains all of this. So just go to the website and search for 4 trillion naira, and you'll be able to understand the issues in the sector. But in summary, the federal government has approved the 4 trillion naira bond aimed at clearing debts. Government said it's going to clear only verified debts. So even if 4 trillion naira is cleared, there will still be a shortfall of about 1.2 trillion naira. But the government says that it's going to pay only what it can verify. Now, this move addresses long-standing areas in the sector. Now, the bond will convert cash liabilities into a long-term instrument, which will allow the government to preserve fiscal space while settling the debt. So the government wants to do it at its own pace, right? So issue the debts, issue a bond such that the bond is bought, right, subscribed to, and the government will take its time and pay over a long period of time. But I'll be joined soon by Don Adinuba, who was a special advisor to former Minister of Power, Professor Bath Naji. He's my guest today, but he is not yet here. He'll be joining soon so that we will take a look at the power sector debt and understand how the government was able to rack up this much debt, right? The debts, go back as 2015. Let's figure out how the government was able to rack up this much debt and what this will do. I mean, is it just the debt? Once the debt is paid, what next? What's going to happen? Now, these debts are not owed only to generation companies, they're also owed to gas suppliers, the companies that supply gas to the Gencos to be able to run. Let's just take a look at the basics, right? This debt has been piling on for years, right? And this bond that the government wants to raise, will still put the government will still be owing, because the government will be owing the subscribers to the bond. But the government is just trying to ensure that these Gencos and gas suppliers have enough money to run their businesses, because the Gencos and gas suppliers have been complaining that they might shut down if these legacy debts aren't settled. Now, to understand bond, for those of you who are non-finance professionals, let's say the government owes, these Gencos, this money that it owes 4 trillion naira, and the government is saying, hey, we can't pay cash right now, but this is a bond paper. It promises to pay you back over time with interest. So the Gencos can actually now take this bond paper and issue in the secondary markets, right? They can do that and get money that they need to run, while the government will wait until this matures to pay what it owes. But I'll still wait for Don C. Adinuba. Let me just take a little break and get in touch with him, because he's supposed to be joining via Zoom here to break it all down.
manufacturing, trade, forest, finance. We talk about it all on the Broad Street Drive on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
We're back on the Broad Street Drive on Nigeria Info 99.3 FM, and I'm Nnoruka. Sorry for that long break. I've been able to get Sidon Adinuba on the phone. Right now, he's joining me to discuss this 4 trillion naira issue. Glad to have you join me on the Broad Street Drive today. Okay, sir. Want to start? Help us understand how the government was able to rack up this much debt. 4 trillion naira. I mean, the Gencos are saying it's more than 4 trillion naira and that it's building monthly.
Well, I do not know how the government arrived at it. So I am not in government and I'm not a consultant or advisor. But what is clear is that by...
But you used to advise the former power minister, Professor Barton.
No, I have a general idea. By May this year, the government's total indebtedness to the Gencos was 4 trillion naira. By August, it had risen to 5 trillion naira. What the government wants to pay right now is 4 trillion naira, whereas the debt is actually in excess of 5 trillion naira. That is to Gencos alone. Meanwhile, the government is owing the discos 200 billion naira. The government should be paying the discos 2 billion every month, but it has not been doing so. So far, I should think that the government is rather silent on its indebtedness to discos. The government is owing all the discos in Nigeria, 11 of them. The only one the government is not owing is Aba Disco. And Aba Disco, incidentally, is the only credit-worthy disco in Nigeria. It's the only credit disco in Nigeria. And that's the 12th disco. The others, 11, were once owned by the government. They got privatized. Out of 11, 10 got privatized in November 2010. The one, Yola, didn't get privatized. It was almost privatized. It was given to the same people who were handed over about a disco. But somewhere along the line, they rejected Yola, saying that they could not continue because of the security crisis in the northeastern region of the country. So we can proceed from here.
So Nigerians would like to understand something. The Gencos were privatized, the discos were privatized. Why is the government still paying them?
The essential truth is that most of the discos got into the wrong hands. The process was not transparent. It was a case of what is called, well, let's put it this way, use a familiar language, nepotism. The process was not transparent, it was not fair. The government kept on interfering at every level. The government thought that these schools were good minds, like the telecoms during that era. So top government officials corner these systems for themselves, sometimes using their friends in the private sector as the funds. A few months after privatization, it was clear that it was a huge error. And the whole country is paying a price for what the government did.
So let's understand something here. When they were privatized, the government was still subsidizing power. In your opinion, how could things have been better? I mean, because first of all, the average Nigerian wants power subsidized. I mean, if we are to be charged for the power you use, if the tariff was cost reflective, I'm sure so many Nigerians will be unable to pay. So the government stepped in, from what I understand, the government stepped in to subsidize power. In your opinion, is this a bad thing, even if they had been in capable hands?
Explanation, but it's not the truth.
So go ahead, tell us what the truth is.
Yeah. One of the first assumptions for privatization, the main reason given was that utility bills had become a big burden on the government, that the government could not continue to spend a fortune on power supply. The government was inefficient, therefore get the private sector that was efficient to run it, so that the huge subsidies could be used in social welfare, that is to say, education and health services, principally. But what happened? God privatized, the government intervened unfairly at different levels. These things got cornered. An example of crony capitalism, not capitalism fair and efficient and effective the way we know it. Well, in a way, the government didn't have a choice after privatization, because if it did not continue with the subsidies, a lot of banks, for example, would have collapsed long ago. The banks didn't know much about the power sector, so they granted huge facilities to this company, hoping they will become partners in progress. But as it turned out, it was a flop, a huge flop. So the government has been constrained to continue to subsidize after privatization, whereas your major reason for subsidizing in the first place was to prevent huge subsidies. I guess I'm clear enough.
Yes, you are clear enough. But let's also understand something. So you're saying that the reason why we have this problem is that the Gencos and Discos were put in the wrong hands.
Well, not necessarily the Gencos, but the Discos.
Okay.
That is clear, it's established. The evidence is overwhelming. There have been a lot of newspaper reports on this matter, which I've read, and very detailed with overwhelming evidence. And these reports align with what I could observe. I was in government, so we saw what was going on, for which reason Baton protested, that they didn't want to hear his voice, and it was had no choice but to resign. And they were happy to see him go, took over everything. And today, everybody is a victim, both the people in governments and the Nigerian people.
Now let's leave the discourse for a while and let's talk about the Gencos right now. Let's talk about the Gencos at this moment. So, does it mean that the people who invested in these Gencos weren't ready for it?
No, the problem is not only the Gencos, it's mostly the discos. But this is what should be a virtuous circle. It has ended up becoming a vicious circle. Virtuous in the sense that the electricity business is a value chain. It's like a chain which is as strong as the weakest parts, the weakest segments. Now, the assumption is that by the way how it is practiced, that end users like you and me would at the end of the month pay their bills to discos, and the discos will now get the revenue and use it to pay both the Gencos and the TCN, that is Transmission Company of Nigeria, the sole transmission network in Nigeria, through which wheels power from the Gencos to the discos. So they will pay them, and the Gencos will in turn pay gas suppliers, since 73% of Nigeria's power is derived from gas-fired power plants. Just only a few of them, 4 of them, are hydroelectricity companies: Jeba, Shiroro, Kaiji, And four of them, all of them are in Niger State. Zungeru was commissioned recently, 700 megawatts power station. So all of them in Niger State. But the rest, the majority, some 30%, are gas fired. That is the way it's supposed to be. But because of indiscipline on the part of a lot of people, both individuals and organizations, instead of being a virtuous circle, it has become a vicious circle. So once you don't pay, the others, the stakeholders, suffer profoundly. Now there is an entity called Nimbet, popularly called the bulk trader. If the government is unable to pay the bulk trader, sorry, if individuals are unable to pay for whatever reason,
the bulk trader
interest will be paid by the government through the bulk trader. But it's not properly funded, therefore it's unable to pay the money as and when due. So that is it's an emergency. Now the question now is, how long can we continue to subsidize? And the subsidies are increasing every day. We have more people using electricity, so the demand is growing. It's unfortunate, in fact tragic, that on August 5th or so, the biggest disco in Nigeria, Ikeja, which was for years held as a model, was taken over by First Bank, which provided the funds through which it was acquired. The same day, a wind power plant, which is the biggest in Nigeria, producing 1,320 megawatts, was also acquired by the people who provided the loans, First Bank. Both Ewin and Ikeja, the biggest disco, Ewin, the biggest Genco, belong to the same group, Sahara Energy. So because of this fortune owed them by the federal governments, they couldn't continue to service their loans. So when the government is owing these people 5 trillion naira, the Gencos and then Discos, 200 billion, and each of your subsidiaries is the biggest in the country, you are bound to be the biggest casualties. So it's tragic. It's tragic. Now, out of the 10 legacy discos that got privatized, 7 have been taken over by creditors. The letters being Ikeja disco. So 7 over 10, leaving Enugu, Jos, and which other one? As the only privatized discos not yet acquired.
And then the way it is, we aren't sure that the creditors, the banks, will be able to run these discos properly. I mean, because that's not what they are set up to do. That's not clear. It's not their job. So let's.
They are not corporate. Yeah, the problem is systematic.
Now let's understand something. So you are saying that the reason why the Gencos are old is because the discos are not properly managed, and so the discos are unable to pay for the power they get from the Gencos, right? Now,
that's why we call it a vicious circle rather than a virtuous circle.
Okay, so because we don't have much time, I really wish that we connected with you earlier, but we are running out of time. Let's try to find out what you would say is the solution to this. Because now the government has agreed to issue this bond to pay its debts, which means that the government itself is taking on long-term debts. And even if the government settles this 4 trillion naira, the Gencos are saying that there is about 1.2 trillion naira more. They say that they are owed roughly 5.2 trillion naira, and the debts keeps increasing.
As the days go by, the debt will continue to balloon.
So what's the solution in sight to
The
this?
future plans. I drew the future plans. Yeah.
I mean, because the bond will just will give temporary relief.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, because the bond will only give temporary relief, right? Not the exact relief we'll seek. And with this situation, investors wouldn't come in to put their money in this place, even though I know that someone recently, I think Adeleke, recently invested about $2 billion in a power plant, right? So what is the future of the power industry, especially generation?
Well, generation is the base. Is the base of the electricity business. The truth is, we have a long way to go. Right now, we're generating roughly 4,500 to 5,000 megawatts. What the country requires is, according to NESI, Nigeria Electricity Supply Industry, we require at least 30,000 megawatts by the year 2030. We are almost approaching the end of 2025. So we are saying that the next 5 years, according to NESI, Nigeria needs to generate 30,000 megawatts. And we are doing some 5,000 at best. That makes the projection pretty unrealistic, in my own opinion.
So Mr. Sidon, Adinuba.
Actually, worse than that. It's worse than that.
So I have to cut in here. Because of time. Just because of time. Because of time.
The suspension. That was some years ago. The federal government suspended PPAs, which is power purchase agreements. With your power purchase agreements, you do not expect new plants. It's exceedingly expensive to build a plant. It will cost you $1.3 million to build 1 megawatt, just 1 megawatt. And the other thing
okay, sorry, we'll just run out of time. But you know what will happen? We'll connect. Let's fix another date next Monday, right? Let's connect. We've talked about the problems, the issues. Let's talk about the solutions next Monday. Yeah. I'm glad to have you again. And that's all on Broad Street Drive today. It's almost 3 p.m. and Yvonne is here for the news.
On Nigeria's first talk radio station.
It is the police and the law enforcement agents you have endangered.
What does this tell you as a Nigerian?
Come to court is part of the corrupt architectural structure.
Somebody with 200 billion and the court will ask the person to pay a fine. Even as a dead body, I will not vote for them.
The conversation never stops on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.